PowerPoint. I don't know if we've got the correct one, but we don't want to follow along with that one. So, good morning. To have you with us this morning. You know, a story is told of a young boy who decided to go fishing one day, and while searching for bait, he found a nest of worms. So he picked one up to put it on his hook, and it bit him. And it hurt really bad. But he pressed on. He really wanted to catch some fish. So he put the worm on the hook, dropped it in the water, and he caught a very large catfish. So he reached down to pick up another worm, and it bit him as well. This time, it didn't hurt quite as bad. It's like his finger was a little bit numb. And so he proceeded to put it on the hook, and he caught another fish. And he repeated this ritual several times until after a while, he started feeling dizzy and sick. And so he decided it was probably best to walk home. And as he made it to the road, he collapsed. A passing motorist saw him laying by the side of the road and asked him if he was all right. When the young boy didn't respond, he picked him up and put him in his car, and he drove him to the hospital, where unfortunately the little boy didn't make it. You see, that nest of worms wasn't really worms, it was a nest of rattlesnakes. And unaware of that, he picked him up and continued to fish, not realizing that with each subsequent bite, it was releasing venom into his system until eventually he shut down. And I think there are a lot of people in our world that are getting bit by Satan over and over again and are completely unaware. They don't realize that his venom is being released in their body. They're ignorant of his schemes and his devices, or they just don't care that this serpent is harming them. They don't feel it's worth the fight. We are involved in a series where we are discussing how we can be stronger as Christians. I believe that is something that we all need to strive to be in our daily lives. We need to strive to be stronger Christians so that we can withstand the attacks of the devil. And in order to be stronger, we need to understand that we are at war. When you became a Christian, you were drafted into the Lord's army. You cannot be neutral here. You have to pick a side. You have to choose whether you're going to fight on God's side or whether you're going to fight on Satan's side. One assures victory, the other one obviously assures defeat. But either way, you have to pick. You can't be Switzerland here. You can't be neutral. You must choose a side. And Paul talks about how we can be stronger and how we are to seek to be stronger by putting on the full armor of God. In Ephesians 6:10 through 13, he exhorts us, finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm. You know what makes this war, this battle so difficult is because it's not like modern warfare. It's not against flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle. And the devil doesn't fight fair. He doesn't approach us in a red suit with horns and a long tail and a pitchfork. If he did, he would be easy to recognize and we could destroy him effectively. But he is so deceptive. Appearing as an angel of light, a cunning serpent, whatever he needs to be in order to get you to fall into temptation, to distract you, to turn your heart and your mind away from God. He has his weapons of mass destruction pointed directly at you. You are his target. How will you respond? Paul goes on to say, stand firm, therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. In addition to all, taking up the shield of faith, with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, with all prayer and petition Pray at all times in the Spirit. And with this in view, be on the alert with all perseverance and petition for all the saints, and pray on my behalf that utterance may be given to me in the opening of my mouth to make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that in proclaiming it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. Last week, or 2 weeks ago I guess it was, we talked about the belt of truth. The belt of truth is the first piece of armor that we put on. It is highly important because it holds all of the other pieces of armor together. We talked about a Roman soldier's armor and how the belt held all the other pieces in place. The same is true for the Christian. The belt of truth holds all the other pieces of our armor in place. Without the belt of truth, the sandals of peace have no use. Without the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness has no purpose. Without the belt of truth, none of these other things that Paul mentions here in Ephesians 6, verses 10 through 20, make any difference in our lives in resisting the devil. The belt of truth has to come first. That is where the sword of the Spirit hangs. But once we have determined to put on the belt of truth, once we have fastened it, then we can move on to the next piece of equipment that we're going to talk about this morning. Not the sandals of peace, but rather the breastplate of righteousness. You know, it's interesting that for the Roman soldier, the breastplate covered the vital organs to protect him in battle, mainly the heart, the lungs, and the intestines. And if you look at, in Bible times, references to the heart, it oftentimes referred to the seat of emotions, of feeling. Even the bowels were included in the person's thinking of the heart. And so the breastplate of righteousness serves the same purpose as it did for the Roman soldier, just in a spiritual sense. It protects our heart. It protects the center of our will and our lives. And that's where Satan attacks us most fiercely, isn't it? He attacks our vital organ of the heart in order to gain access and to turn us away from God. Have you ever been up late one night and watched those infomercials that offer a product not sold in stores? It's always $19.99, and of course they give you 3 or 4 extra ones if you'll just buy the product, right? Have you ever been duped into buying one of those? Maybe you bought one that worked. I bought one not long ago. It was one of those touch-up paint pens. Have you seen those? And they're supposed to work on your automobile to cover scratches and magically remove all the scratches because they match the paint on your vehicle. I bought one of those and it was absolutely worthless. I got it and was completely and totally disappointed. I had been deceived because I bought one of these not sold in stores items. I guess that's why they're not sold in stores, right? Because they are deceptive. I think as human beings, as people, we don't like being deceived about something. If something is advertised as being a certain way, we expect it to live up to that advertisement, right? We expect that in the products that we buy, but we also expect that in people as well, don't we? We expect people to be who they say they are. We value integrity and character. Maybe not so much in ourselves, but certainly in other people. We want people to live up to who they say they are. If someone claims to be a Christian, we think that their lives should match that claim. The belt of truth is important. In fact, it is vital because it holds all the other pieces together. But once we have secured ourselves with the belt of truth, we move on to those next pieces of armor that are there to protect us. And we see that throughout the Bible, Jesus in the New Testament talks about what it means to live righteously and to be the type of person that you claim to be. He had some of the harshest rebuke reserved for the Pharisees. In fact, in Matthew 23, verses 27 and 28, we read, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. So you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." You see, the Pharisees appeared to be righteous. They looked righteous on the outside. They seemed to live up to the standard of righteousness. They seemed to do all the right things, say all the right things. But in essence, Jesus is saying it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. It doesn't matter what your exterior reflects. It's what's inside that matters. It's what's in the heart that matters. And that's what the breastplate of righteousness is for. The belt of truth is vital. But once we get that belt strapped around us, then we move on to what's inside of us. I've said before, truth is very important. Truth is vital. It says everything about us, everything that we believe, and what you believe will eventually come out, right? But it doesn't matter what you believe if you're not going to put it into practice. I was talking to a good friend not long ago who is intimately acquainted with the church here and things, and he knows about Oldham Lane, and he attends another church here in town, and he was talking with an elder because unfortunately they were talking about making some wholesale changes in the structure of worship and the structure of their leadership and things of that nature. And this gentleman was upset about that, and he was having a meeting with one of the elders that he trusted, and he learned some things that were rather disheartening to him. And one of the things he told him is, he said, "You know what the fastest growing Church of Christ in town is?" And the elder responded, "No, I don't." He said, "It's Oldham Lane Church of Christ." And he said, "You know what probably the most conservative church in town is?" And he said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Probably the Oldham Lane Church of Christ." You know, I think that's a badge of honor to be a truth-telling church, to be a church that abides by the truth, that teaches the truth and preaches the truth. But folks, that's not the only thing I want to be known for, is it you? If all we're known for is people who believe the truth and teach the truth, that's not enough. That's incomplete. We need to be a people who practice the truth. Because you and I both know of people who know the Bible like the back of the hand, but they're not living it. They know Scripture, they can quote Scripture, but they're not living a godly life or a righteous life. So it's not just about what you know, it's about what you do with what you know. It's incomplete if you believe the truth, but you don't practice the truth. Your knowledge doesn't mean anything if you're not going to put it into practice. In Matthew 5:20, Jesus said these words, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter into the kingdom of heaven." It's not just about what you know, it's about what you do with what you know, and it's not just about appearing to be righteous or looking righteous. The scribes and the Pharisees splashed on righteousness like it was cheap cologne, but they were not any more righteous than the next person. No matter how righteous they appeared to be, it was only something that was external. We've got to get it in our hearts. We've got to take the truth, we've got to get it residing in our hearts and thus exposing it to others. Getting it out there so that people see that we live what we believe, that we are striving to not only be truth tellers, but truth livers. Righteousness is something that must be pursued with all of our might. It's not just about knowing doctrine. It's not just about knowing the truth. It's about pursuing it and living it at all costs. Jesus said this in Matthew 5:6 as part of the Beatitudes. "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." Righteousness, as it appears in this verse, is the Greek word dikaiosune, and it means integrity, virtue, purity of life, uprightness, correctness of thinking, feeling, and acting. It has to do with whatever has been appointed by God to be acknowledged and obeyed by man. Here, dikaiosune appears in the direct accusative form. Now, that may not mean much to you, and to be honest with you, it's pretty confusing when you get into the Greek language. But when we see the verbs hungering and thirsting take on the accusative form rather than the normal genitive form, the meaning suggests a hunger and a thirst for the whole thing. So if you say, "I hunger for bread," you hunger for the whole loaf. If you're saying in this form that you are thirsting, then you thirst for the whole pitcher, not just a drink, not just a slice of bread. It is a hungering and a thirsting for the whole thing. Jesus' audience would have known exactly what he was talking about here. They would have gotten this message loudly and clearly. There were very few people living in this day and age that didn't know what it meant to go hungry or thirsty. Many people were always on the borderline of hungering and real starvation. They were not only thirsting, they were dying of thirst many times. You imagine a man who is walking along and a desert sandstorm blows, and the only thing that he can do to take refuge is to pull a cloak over his head and to wait it out, and all the while the sand is swirling and filling his nostrils and his throat almost to the point of suffocation. That's what Jesus is referencing here. Somebody who is in that state, that is so thirsty they can't swallow, they can hardly go forward without having their thirst quenched. It's a hungering that is so intense that you can't go forward, that you can't function until that need is met. It's not like us where we're driving around and we're kind of hungry, so we stop off at Burger King and get some fries and a Coke. That's not what's being talked about here. Many of us would have no clue about Jesus and his words here if we were sitting in the audience that day from our own modern day of thinking, because we just don't know what that's like. We don't know what it's like, most of us, to truly thirst, to truly be hungry, but these people would have. Because it was very rare for people to have their stomachs filled, to have their thirst totally quenched. They couldn't just turn on a faucet outside of their house and get cold, pure, filtered water. And so this is a hunger and a thirst that is intense, folks. This is a hungering and a thirsting that is powerful. Hunger and thirst are the most powerful drives a person has. If you've ever been extremely hungry, you know there comes a point where you're going to have to get something to eat if you're expected to do anything else the rest of the day, right? There are times that perhaps you've been engaged in sports or other activities where you just needed a drink of water or else you were going to shut down. Jesus is not talking about some passing or fleeting feeling here. He's talking about a drive that controls us to where we can't go forward until that need is met. It's an intense, deep craving. And he says this in John chapter 6. For my flesh is true food and my blood is true drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me and I in him. Every day we eat. We eat for various reasons. Most of the time we eat because we're hungry. We eat to sustain life. Sometimes we eat because we're bored. Sometimes we eat because we're depressed. Whatever the reason, we all eat, and we usually eat several times a day, right? And as we eat, we ingest food, we assimilate food, and the body keeps what it needs and expels what it doesn't, to where we actually become what we eat physiologically. We assimilate food to where it becomes a part of our bodies. And in essence, that's what Jesus is talking about here in a spiritual sense. When you ingest me, I get inside of you. I control you. I take over. And you become what you eat. You become Christ-like. In the book of Hosea, the prophet says these words to the nation of Israel. What shall I do with you, O Ephraim? What shall I do with you, O Judah? For your loyalty is like a morning cloud and like the dew which goes away early. Israel was constantly going away, falling away, and repenting and coming back, then slipping back into their sin. It was a constant cycle. Her righteousness was like the morning cloud or like the dew. It was here one minute and gone the next. It was a passing feeling, a passing hunger. It could be likened to that person who's hungry, and so they take a Snickers, and they eat that Snickers because Snickers satisfies, right? But only for about 30 minutes. Then you're hungry again. Then you take in another junk food snack, and it satisfies for a moment, but then you're hungry again. Hunger and thirst are not passing feelings, and Jesus was trying to get this point across. He wanted the people to hunger for something more, to seek something deeper, to crave something more out of life. When you're truly hungry or thirsty, it hurts, it's painful, it continues to increase in intensity, making one feel desperate. It even causes suffering until it's sustained. To hunger and thirst for righteousness has to be desperation. It has to be something that we are desperate about, where you feel as though life is ebbing away until you fulfill this urge or this desire. But here's the thing. Here's the most important thing about it. You've got to want it. I can't make you want it. I can't make you eat. You know what one of the staples, one of the basic foods that we eat in Arkansas is? Biscuits and chocolate gravy. You ever ate biscuits and chocolate gravy? You know, I tell people here in Texas about biscuits and chocolate gravy, and they look at me like I kicked their dog. They have no idea what biscuits and chocolate gravy is. But you know what? I can tell you all I want about how great this food is, how incredible it is to the taste buds, and how you're missing out if you've never had biscuits and chocolate gravy. I could tell you that all I want, but I can't force it on you. I can't make you eat it. I can prepare it, set it in front of you, but I can't force you to eat it. And the same is true when it comes to righteousness. I can't make you hunger and thirst for it. I can't just bestow it upon you and say, here. You've got to want it. You've got to accept it. You've got to have the drive yourself. Jesus can tell us over and over again in his word about how essential it is to be filled with righteousness. But we've got to want it. We've got to pursue it ourselves. The intensity that a starving person has toward nourishment is the same kind of intensity that we should have toward righteousness. We need to be so hungry and so desperate that we pursue it at all costs. Listen to some verses. Thank you, Dave, for leading that song a moment ago. As the deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? This is not a hunger or a thirst that is a passing feeling that David is describing here. Psalm 63 and verse 1 reads, O God, you are my God. I shall seek you earnestly. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh yearns for you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. People hunger and thirst for so many things in our world. Unfortunately, it's usually not righteousness. People hunger and thirst for fame and fortune. They hunger and thirst for things that are worldly and not godly. We need an intense desire, a diligent pursuit for everything that is righteous. Multitudes of people in our world are trying to quench their thirst with the things of this world, and sadly, they find themselves malnourished in the end. Many people are filling up on the junk food of this world. Unfortunately, far too many individuals have full stomachs but empty hearts. By the world's standard, they are filled, but spiritually, they are empty. They are dry as a bone. It's kind of like the child that refuses to let go of a marble to get a diamond. We can trade up to something better, and yet we don't. We cling to these worldly things, and we won't let go of them for heavenly things. Why? Why is that? Why have we invested so much in the things of this world rather than clinging to spiritual things? We have strayed, and we have found ourselves stranded in a pit of 1,000 excuses. Why do we choose pain and misery when we can have forgiveness and peace? Why do we choose to be desolate, to be knocked down by this world, instead of trading up for something better? Why? For some reason, we think this world offers the best. And sadly, we never look around to realize that kingdom things are the most important things. It's kind of like the illustration of $3 worth of God. You've heard that illustration? I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Not enough to explode my soul or disturb my sleep, but just enough to equal a cup of warm milk or a snooze in the sunshine. I don't want enough of him to make me love a poor person or pick beets with a migrant. I want ecstasy, not transformation. I want the warmth of the womb, not a new birth. I want a pound of the eternal in a paper sack. I would like to buy $3 worth of God, please. Do we only want $3 worth of God? I see so often Christians within the Lord's church giving so much time and attention, pursuing things that are earthly, and so often the church gets what's left over. The church gets the crumbs. God gets the crumbs of whatever is left at the end of the day, at the end of the pursuit. How sad it is that most of us are satisfied with just $3 worth of God. We don't want the whole thing. We want just enough to make us feel good about ourselves and make us think that we're on the narrow road and that we're on the road that leads to heaven. And sadly, we have fooled ourselves into thinking that that's enough. We don't want radical change. We just want enough to appease us, and we think to appease God. But we've got to reach the point where we say, God, I want you. And I want you so badly that I'm willing to give up anything and everything that stands in the way. I'm willing to pursue you with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength, to give you my everything, my all, because I understand that you are the most important thing in my life, and I want to keep you there. I want to put you in your proper place and give you everything I have, because that's the only way to live. I can't give that to you. I can't make you do that, nor can you make me pursue God with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength. You've got to want it. There has to be a desperation. You must say to yourself, this means everything to me, and I'm going to pursue it at all costs. You've heard of the Paul Harvey commentator, The Rest of the Story. In one of his broadcasts, Paul Harvey, telling the rest of the story, talks about a woman by the name of Terry who wanted to give her husband a very good Christmas present, but she was afraid that she couldn't afford it. Her husband was a police officer. She stayed at home, and so they lived on a pretty fixed income. She knew exactly what she wanted to buy her husband for Christmas, but she was afraid that they couldn't afford it. She went to a local store that she knew sold the item, and she checked out the price. And sure enough, it was beyond their means. She talked to the store owner, and she tried to strike a deal. You see, it was only September, and she said, if you'll hold the item, I'll pay you a little bit now, a little bit the next month, a little bit the next month, and I'll have it paid off before Christmas. Well, the store owner knew her husband, knew that he was a police officer, and said, I tell you what, you go ahead and take the item and just pay me what you can, and we'll settle up later. Well, she was ecstatic because this was the best gift that she could give her husband. She was so excited, she took it home, she wrapped it up, but she couldn't wait till Christmas. And so when her husband came home, she went ahead and gave him the gift. And of course, he was elated because it was something that he wanted badly as well, and she was so happy to give him the gift. One night, her husband was working late, working the night shift actually, and there was a robbery, and he was called to the scene. And as he got there, he saw the robber driving away, and so he chased him down. And a few blocks later, he was able to catch up to him and cut him off. And as he got out of the car and walked up to the perpetrator's driver door swung open, and he shot his .45 caliber pistol into the chest of Terry's husband. So Terry was awakened from her sleep by a knock at the door, and it was a police officer who said, Terry, I've got some bad news. Your husband's been shot. But I've got some good news as well. And Terry broke down crying because she knew what the good news was. She knew that the gift that she bought him and gave to him early saved his life. It was a bulletproof vest that protected his vital organs so that he was not killed that night. And she was so thankful that that shop owner allowed her to take it early. And she was so grateful that she gave it to him early and didn't wait till Christmas because it saved her husband's life. That, as Paul Harvey says, is the rest of the story. And here is the rest of the story for each and every one of us. Those who passionately pursue righteousness will be filled. We will not go hungry. We will not go thirsty, but rather we will be filled with everlasting food and drink. We drink from that living water. We have that bread that comes down out of heaven. We are filled. True fulfillment comes from a relationship with God, with Jesus Christ. When our heart is filled with righteousness, we are protected. We have that breastplate put on, and Satan can't get to us. That is what we should be seeking. So the question becomes, and the question that I'll leave you with this morning is again, how bad do you want it? Is this something that you're ready to pursue with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Like that good friend of mine who said, you know, great things are happening out at Oldham Lane. You guys are busting at the seams. You guys are preaching the truth. That's a great compliment. Now let's do the truth. Let's pursue righteousness with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Let's take it to the world around us. Let's show others how to put on this full armor of God and help them withstand the attacks of the devil. We want to increase the Lord's army. We want to increase his kingdom. We want to make a difference in the world around us. Start by making a difference in your life. If we can do that with you this morning, if we can pray with you, or if you're ready to put on Christ in baptism, whatever your need is, come now as we stand and as we sing.